All righty, welcome back from the episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Friday, March 31st, and I'll apologize. I'm a little under the weather, just allergies and springtime here in Oklahoma. So just going to power through here. So bear with me. So, and here we go. So here's what we're going to be talking about today is the pro day for OU, some results, some pretty impressive outings by a few, maybe a few that I would have thought would have went a little differently. Just some overall thoughts there. OU made a top four for another quarterback in 24. Always a good thing, but kind of crazy. And Samaj Jones. And we're going to be talking Michael Hawkins, Malik Hawkins, and Josiah Martin being on campus this week. And then OU is set to host a JUCO quarterback. And then Oklahoma's got three new kids that have came out and said that they're going to be taking officials to Oklahoma this summer. So that's always a good thing to see, and some positive momentum moving into early summer for some official visits. So let's get into it. So today's episode, the pro day, that's where we're going to start. So initially, when I look at the pro day and the results, the first guy that stands out to me is Marvin Mims. He ran a 4.38. He's got some legitimate speed. Anton Harrison ran a 4.98 40 and benched 24 times. That's really impressive. And put that in perspective for Anton, how impressive that is he comparing to Wanya? Wanya didn't bench according to OU's website, but he ran a 5.1 for his 40. And then Chris Murray ran a 5.29 and he benched 21 times. So there's a reason why Anton Harrison is being projected a first round guy. And I do think that's where he's going to end up going, maybe mid to late first round. Has that much of a high upside. What are some of your thoughts on him? Any other people that really stood out? Also, Trey Morrison benching 19 times and running a 4.57 is pretty impressive as well.
Yeah. So starting with Anton, we talked about him. We talked about his draft stock a little bit right after the season ended. And I think for the most part, we were all, and the three of us were in agreement, or I guess it was you and me at the time. Could have been a first round if, he had really good lead up to the draft, but would seem to be likely a day 2 pick, which isn't a bad thing. Getting drafted in the NFL isn't a bad thing at all, no matter what round. But obviously, the dream is to be a first rounder. Now it seems like everything he's done leading up to the draft here in less than a month is leaning towards him being a first round guy, maybe late first round guy, earning himself multiple $1 million there just from being a day 1 pick to day 2. And there's plenty of teams that need more linemen. I mean, you saw the Texans, or not the Texans, the Titans, released Taylor Lewan. He's been there forever. They're going to need more offensive line help, especially if they're going to stay a run-heavy team. Can't really stay run-heavy when your offensive line stinks. Cincinnati Bengals, I know that they signed Orlando, but I'm sure that they will always welcome more offensive line help, because it seems like no matter how many people they have in front of Joe Burrow, they manage to also try to kill him every season. So trying to get more fat boys in front of him isn't a bad thing in other teams, but there's plenty of opportunity there in the late round. So that also means he'd probably go to a good team if he is a late first round guy. So he wouldn't have to suffer through the suck like Laramie Tunsil has in Houston. Eric Gray, the numbers don't surprise me. I mean, we saw what he did last season. I mean, it's going to be tough for him to crack, a first round or even a day 2 pick, just because the running back market, if you're NFL fans and you're looking at what's been going on so far in the offseason, running backs really aren't getting paid. You got Austin Eckler who wants to get traded out of Los Angeles. More than likely, running backs are going to start slipping down the board, and you'll see a big run at them in maybe late day 2, early day 3, depending on the teams that are picking and the positions and all that stuff. But I think it seems like Oklahoma will have a good batch of guys drafted in this round, which is just more ammo to throw out there for these guys that they're recruiting, because at the end of the day, the guys coming out of high school, their dream is to be in the NFL. If you can show that you can produce talent that gets drafted in the NFL, they're more than likely going to entertain the idea of attending your university and playing football.
Oh, definitely. And another guy that I did fail to mention in the very beginning was Jalen Redmond. Redmond benched. He was, from what I could tell, he benched the most, 27 times. That's pretty good, and ran a 4.81. Now I know he's a day three guy. There's obviously concerns with him regarding his health. When he's on the field, he's good. We've saw flashes when he was in Oklahoma, or play for Oklahoma. Again, it's just sometimes your greatest ability is your availability, and that is something that has plagued him. But with that performance at the pro day, I still think he's a day three guy, but he might have earned himself maybe go in the fifth round, or the fourth round, rather than going in the sixth. I think with his size nearly being 300 pounds, he might be slightly a little smaller than you would like for an interior defensive lineman in the NFL. You might be able to beef him up. He's obviously got the strength. He's got good speed, being at 4.81 defensive lineman. So he might have earned himself an extra round or two with that performance. I hope anyway. But again, the biggest thing with him, and I think the biggest knock and why he's projected so late, is because he just can't be on. He hasn't been on the field as a collegiate player. So overall, it was a good outing. Some players made themselves some money. Some players didn't really move, and some players, it is what it is at this point, and that's why you're the 1% in college, and then the 1% of the 1% goes and plays in the NFL, and that's just unfortunate. And that's why you get a good education and come to Oklahoma, so you can lean back on that. So moving on. So as I alluded to earlier, Oklahoma made a top four for a quarterback not named Mike Hawkins. This one is Samaj Jones, 2024 four-star quarterback out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's 5'11", 203 pounds, shorter guy, a little heavier. He put out a top four that included Oklahoma, Penn State, Cincinnati, and I am blanking, and West Virginia are his top four. I know he visited Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure he visited unofficially this past weekend. It was definitely this past weekend. So Oklahoma obviously is recruiting Samaj Jones, but we all know that Mike Hawkins is their priority. I think Oklahoma is open to the idea of taking two quarterbacks in this class, because we obviously saw what happened not having great quarterback depth behind your starting quarterback, and then you get Davis Bevel. So I think they're trying to address this. Now, I mean, do I really think that Oklahoma is ultimately the landing spot, assuming that Michael Hawkins is a Sooner? Personally, I don't. Just me thinking logically, and if I were in his shoes, if I had an offer to go play at Penn State, Cincinnati, or West Virginia, and could go be the guy there and not have a Jackson Arnold, and then have a Mike Hawkins, and then have a Kevin Sperry behind me, there's only so many snaps to go around. Just looking at him and his stat and weight, he kind of reminds me a little bit of a Jalen Hurts, maybe a little undersized, but heavier and kind of bulky. What do you think?
So in my mind, it's like a mix of Kyler and Jalen, because he's bulky like Jalen, but smaller like Kyler. I think that's going to be the biggest criticisms that he's going to face for the rest of his football career as a quarterback, being that small. You hear all the time about Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson. You just have to somehow overcome it. He's a good football player. I agree that Oklahoma, it seems like the clear priority there is Mike Hawkins. And we've known that for a while now. But it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that two quarterbacks are in this class. We were talking about it beforehand. The way that I see this going down is Mike Hawkins commits here in about a week to OU. He's the signal caller that they've been going after for the longest. If Samaj were to be interested and wants to also be part of the class, OU's not going to turn him down. Because if you look at the quarterback room after this year, you've got Jackson Arnold, and then Mike Hawkins would potentially be his backup. Davis Bevel still has eligibility. General Booty still has eligibility, but we don't know what General Booty is. We haven't seen what he's like in a real game. We saw Davis Bevel. I'm not going to keep trashing on the guy. So it wouldn't be the worst idea to take two quarterbacks, especially in the same class. You've seen other schools do it. It's not like it would be a new concept. Alabama just did it last recruiting cycle. It could help bring those two guys up together and have them continuously compete. I mean, if you look at what both quarterbacks are, I wouldn't say either of them are the greatest quarterback prospects. They're very good football players and they have high potential because of their skill set, and they're still improving clearly. But if you put them in a situation they feel comfortable, I'm not gonna you don't want to put yourself in a situation as a football program where these guys come in and assume, okay, I'm for sure going to be the QB2, and maybe the work ethic doesn't get pushed to that extra gear that they need to. And bringing two quarterbacks in could be useful in this situation. Every person's different, so I'm not saying that they will want that they would do that they would just sit back and say I'm the clear QB2 until Jackson Arnold leaves. But they both have a lot of improving to do. Mike Hawkins, to me, looks like a Nick Evers when you watch them play at the high school level. Both mobile quarterbacks, taller guys. Accuracy is the biggest question mark for them. Samaj, on the other hand, smaller dude. Is he going to be able to be as mobile as he needs to be able to see the field, be able to see over the offensive line, because our offensive line is getting bigger. We're getting into the SEC. It's big boys. Not impossible, but can you do it? So you kind of got two different quarterbacks there that you could potentially develop, and they do have different styles. Samaj does kind of play like a Kyler Murray because he does a lot of running as a quarterback, and that could help because this is a run heavy offense.
It is definitely a run heavy offense, and that's a good comparison maybe of a mix between Kyler and Jalen. And, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you. I mean, if he wants to be a Sooner, Oklahoma's not going to tell him no. But if I were thinking from his shoes, there's just too many mouths to feed for a quarterback room. And I wouldn't blame him for looking elsewhere. But, I mean, in the off chance, Mike Hawkins goes to TCU, this is a contingency plan. And I like the idea that the fact that Oklahoma's recruiting multiple people, because it felt like with the previous staff, at times we were caught with our pants on the ground and not having a second backup plan. And at least you got something. You're putting a top four. You might not get them, but if Michael Hawkins goes south, you at least have a quarterback coming potentially, with Oklahoma being the most elite program on his top four. So speaking of Michael Hawkins, Malik Hawkins, and Josiah Martin, we talked a little bit about Josiah Martin on Wednesday's episode. But the trio, both Hawkins and Martin, visited Oklahoma on Wednesday. Not a whole lot as far as, momentum or anything like that on Michael Hawkins. Obviously, it's good to get him on campus basically a week before his commitment. You can't really complain about that. I would assume, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Oklahoma, that's the last visit he's taken between now and then. Maybe he'll make a trip to TCU. I don't know. But they might be the last visit. And even if they're not, I mean, I still feel really good getting him on campus a week before his announcement. I mean, my gut hasn't changed. As yours?
No, it seems pretty like a pretty surefire thing. Obviously, you don't know until he makes that commitment, but would be very surprising if he were to pick TCU at this point.
Yeah. And speaking of Josiah Martin, him visiting Wednesday, and as of us recording this, he doesn't have an offer from Oklahoma. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like he probably deserves an offer. What do you think?
He's a talented guy, and we talked about it in the last episode. It is strange he doesn't have one because of the connection to multiple guys on the team at this point. He is a talented player, but then the thing that's going against him is that the wide receivers coach at Samaj Jones has the guys he really wants already seemingly in a very good position to land them in Wesco and Kearney. So maybe they come back, but it's going to be like you said in our last episode. If he is a talented player, and these kind of guys don't just sit around and wait for an offer and hope that you're going to get him, because they have to also go through their own process. He's got schools like Alabama on his offer list already as well. So it could be a situation where if things go south in the wide receiver recruiting, which I don't expect them to, but you never know in recruiting, if they were to go south, does Oklahoma have to backtrack to offer Josiah Martin and then have to play catch up in his recruitment, which is obviously not what you want to do, but sometimes that's the position that you're put in.
And that's the truth. You are put in that position, and Oklahoma has been in there before, and you never want to be there. But I mean, you can't. I do agree with you. I mean, Oklahoma's in a really good spot with a lot of elite receivers. So it's not like Oklahoma's desperate, but we've seen it before where they become desperate. And that's never something that you really want to be. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, this could be nothing if Oklahoma picks up the commitment from Brian Wesco and Zion Kearney and say someone like I'm blanking on a third, but if Oklahoma picks up 5 stars and a couple 4 stars, we're not going to really be upset. I know I won't anyway. So moving on, Oklahoma will be hosting today, as this video is being aired, Friday. Oklahoma's hosting Anthony Robinson. He's a JUCO corner, 6'3", 192 pounds, out of Butler Community College. According to his Twitter profile, he's currently committed to Colorado with Deion Sanders. He committed to them in early December last year. But Oklahoma is hosting him. He's been picking up offers from other programs, even though he's committed. And I think we talked about him one time before, talking about his recruitment or receiving an offer. And what this is telling me is obviously Oklahoma is genuinely interested in him, because there's probably a defensive back or two that's going to leave the program. I don't know who. I'm not going to really speculate after the spring ball. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a DB enter the transfer portal. And I think this is Oklahoma being proactive, saying we're going to recruit you in the anticipation that we might lose one or two. If we don't, then we don't have a spot for you. But if someone does transfer and leave, we potentially have someone to fill in his shoes. 6'3", almost 200 pounds jumps off the board to me. What do you think about recruiting him, his size, and things like that?
So I was trying to remind myself about this player because I remember we talked about him a little bit a few months ago. The fact that he is committed to Deion Sanders and then is still exploring options, and Oklahoma's one of them, I think shows again why Jay Valai is on this staff. Outside of developing, the dude is just great at connecting with these players and getting them on campus and entertaining the idea of being part of this squad. Can Jay Valai know you get him to flip from that commitment of going to Colorado and coming to Norman? I think it's possible, but I'm sure some people are thinking, why would the guy go to Colorado? It's not in Oklahoma. It's not a blue blood. But they have Deion Sanders. You can't. I mean, I know Jay Valai is great, but Deion Sanders is Deion Sanders. Like him or hate him, he was one of the best cornerbacks to play football ever. So if he can teach these guys how to play football, he's going to keep attracting these talented DBs. It definitely seems like it would have to be a situation where a guy ends up leaving to the transfer portal after the spring, and then you're kind of putting yourself in a position as, with Jay Valai in Oklahoma and Anthony Robinson to bring him in, if that were to be the situation. Now, if someone doesn't leave, then does that change this recruitment? Is he going to be a take regardless because they want to continue to build the depth in the defensive back room because of injury, or just simply the younger guys are falling behind in development and getting on the field? Well, that's still a thing to be seen. But it's good that we're competing against a guy that is clearly very appealing to defensive backs at all levels, both JUCO and a guy that's pulled the number one corner in 2 straight classes.
anytime. I mean, the Deion Sanders factor is something that you really can't predict. So I do agree with you. At the end of the day, Oklahoma, I'm biased, would put him in a better spot to maybe succeed. But at the end of the day, Deion Sanders was a great corner, and there's a reason why he locked down the number one corner last year and then still has Travis Hunter following him to Colorado. I know, according to his profile, Twitter profile, it looks like he's making a visit to Miami and Florida State this month, and then Oklahoma. So he's obviously still exploring options and isn't locked down to one program at this point. And maybe a lot of it is he's got a for sure spot at Colorado, but these other programs, say like Oklahoma, just doesn't know what the numbers are going to look like. And maybe Oklahoma's not the only program that's in that position. And maybe he's just seeing, and then if a spot opens and he might like one school or another, and maybe that's where he'll end up going. Not saying that he's going to decommit or anything, or that's the reason why he's not an Oklahoma Sooner, is just because Oklahoma's unsure of him. I mean, it very well might be just that he wants to go to Colorado. I mean, it'll be something that we'll have to watch. So moving
NIL
on.
might be
Oh,
sorry, NIL might be a piece in it too. If I mean, looking at the teams you just brought up, all of them could probably help in the NIL front more than Colorado potentially, because it seems like Colorado's still trying to raise funds for just paying Deion Sanders and making sure they can cover that salary. I know that obviously the schools don't get involved in NIL, but they need donors to get involved, and that's going to be that could potentially be a factor here.
it definitely could. I mean, Oklahoma's established premier blue blood program. Miami obviously seems to be playing the NIL game hard. So yeah, that's actually a really good point. And you're coming from JUCO, so you're starving for making some money and becoming a higher profile athlete, because you want to make it bad after being at JUCO for a year or two. So before we move on to the last section of the video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps us out a lot. So Oklahoma, obviously, this past weekend hosted a ton of visitors. And since then, and some other people that visited earlier in March, people have been scheduling official visits to Oklahoma for the weekend of June 16th through the 18th. We'll start with Jordan Lockhart. Lockhart recently received an offer from Oklahoma just about a week and a half ago. He came out for an unofficial out to Oklahoma this past weekend. 6'3", 230-pound linebacker from St. John Bosco, one of the premier high school football programs. 4-star linebacker. He's scheduled to visit Oklahoma officially June 16th through the 18th. I love the way that this is trending. You get an offer, you come out unofficially, you schedule an official. Oklahoma seems to be in the thick of it. James Peoples announced that he's going to be taking an OV that weekend, 2024, 4-star running back, the number 5 running back overall in the class. Basically, the only two officials he has set is OU and Ohio State, which we feel like Ohio State is probably the leader in this case. And he is an elite running back himself, averaging 10 yards a carry, 1,900 yards, and 28 touchdowns last year. And then Oklahoma also has an official set up with Joseph Jonah Ajone, I think that's how you say his name, out of Conroe, Texas, 6'4", 255-pound defensive lineman, 2024 4-star. He has an official set up with Oklahoma that same weekend. And, you look at it, 2 defensive players and 1 offensive player. James Peoples, I feel like Oklahoma might be fighting an uphill battle here. But I feel Oklahoma is definitely in the thick of it. For Lockhart, I'm unsure of where Joseph Jonah Ajone sits right now, but it's obviously good that he's spending one of his 5 officials. What do you think on those 3 guys? Where does Oklahoma sit, and where do you see it going?
That weekend, just with the 3, and then we talked about Faboy Torre. I believe it was in the last video or the one before that. Already you have 4 very talented players, 3 defensively, making that's officially scheduled. Then you still have David Stone, Williams Nwaneri, Nigel Smith, and plenty of others that still haven't officially made that scheduled official visit, but you'd assume that is going to be the weekend where June 16th comes, and then the next 3 weeks we're going to see just commitments roll in like crazy. And hopefully I think Jordan Lockhart, out of the three that you mentioned here, seems to be the one that OU's in the best position for. I agree with James Peoples. I love his running style. Ohio State does seem to have pulled ahead a little bit there, and I think it was Parker Thune that put in a crystal ball for Ohio State in that recruitment. He is going to, I believe he's going to OU spring game as well, so it's not like OU's completely out of it. We just have to pretty much you got to put your faith into Marco Murray, and he hasn't led us wrong yet. So I think DeMarco can definitely get OU back to questioning, or to making James question if Ohio State's really the best place for him. And if you kind of look at the running back production over the last couple of years between Oklahoma and Ohio State, I think it would favor Oklahoma. And I'm trying to take my bias out of it. If last year the running backs for Ohio State did not do great. They weren't terrible, but they weren't at Oklahoma. They weren't like Eric Gray. And then Joseph Jonah Ajone, he's a very talented defensive lineman. We haven't talked about him too much, but Oklahoma also seems to be put themselves in a good position to get his commitment. It would not surprise me if we see two of those three guys be in an OU uniform. And at this point, it seems like it's the defensive guys. Hopefully James Peoples also hops on that bandwagon, because to me, he is definitely, and Brandon as well. I know he's not on the episode, but he's mentioned it. He seems to be the one of the best running backs, regardless of rank, in this class. It would be great to have him. To me, he runs like Saquon Barkley, so to have a Saquon 2.0 on the team wouldn't be a bad thing.
No, it's never bad to have a Saquon Barkley 2.0 on the squad, because he was obviously elite at Penn State, and he's been great in the NFL for the most part. But yeah, I think June 16th through the 18th, I would imagine that's their Champ U barbecue that they're going to make. It's trending well. I would imagine we're going to be seeing over the next month, especially once we get through the spring game, where we're going to see a lot of officials get set up for the summer, and probably that weekend. And I'd imagine they'll have another weekend in July as well, where they'll split up the OV so they can focus and prioritize and make kids a priority, and not have so many kids on campus like last weekend, where it was just seemed like a madhouse, which is always good though. So that's all I've got. Do you have any final thoughts? I mean, we're rolling into April. The spring game is 3 weeks from Saturday. It's coming up. I mean, before we know it, it's going to be summer ball, and we're going to be rolling into commitments here pretty soon. There's a lot of positive momentum. What do you think?
I'm in agreement there. No individual challenges for me this weekend. Just kind of tell us what you think about what this first official weekend of visits, how you feel it could turn out. Because just from the first four that have officially scheduled that visit, Oklahoma is going to be doing just fine once the summer comes. We'll see how many commitments they have once summer starts.
Definitely. I think Oklahoma's going to be a great spot. And then by the 4th of July, and we get into July, most of the class is going to be full, is my take. Maybe by August 1st, most of the class will be full, and hopefully we have a 4th of July with a few commitments. Much as we don't like Caleb Williams, that was really cool when he committed on 4th of July. So anyway, made it this far. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And remember, if you're already subscribed, when you like the video and comment on the video, it helps us out a lot. And also leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. And we will catch you guys next month, April. We'll see you Monday, and hopefully have some updates, maybe rolling into Michael Hawkins and a few other things. Have a good weekend.